letting go. It's one of those things, right? We hear it all the time, but actually doing it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. I mean, we all have those things, don't we? Those things we cling to.
We do.
For me, it's that worn out sweater. You know the one, right? Too many memories packed in there. Or, okay, don't judge me on this, but that stack of magazines from like 2017, I swear I'll reread them someday. But you, dear listener, you're here for the deep dive, and today it's all about letting go. And we thought, what better guide than Buddhist philosophy?
Right.
But don't worry, you don't have to shave your head or anything to get some wisdom out of this.
Exactly. The excerpt we're looking at today, it's all about the practical stuff. No robes required. We're here to, to mine it for those nuggets of wisdom. You know, the stuff you can actually use.
Love that. Okay, so the source material, it jumps right in, you
Yeah.
know. It goes straight to this idea of impermanence. It's basically saying, look, everything's changing, so holding on, well, you're just setting yourself up for a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but man, sometimes it's just so hard to really get.
Well, it's like our minds, they naturally resist that idea. Impermanence, I mean. We want stability. We want things to be predictable. We crave this feeling of control. But here's the thing. When we finally accept that everything changes, that it's all in flux, that's when we actually become free.
It's like, oh, what's that analogy? Trying to hold on to water. The tighter you grip, the more you lose.
Right?
Right.
That's it.
And, you know, the Source even uses our own bodies as an example. I mean, come on, we're literally not the same person we were a few years ago. Cells are doing their thing, always regenerating, we're learning, changing. And yet there's this part of us that still clings to this idea, this fixed me.
It really is fascinating.
Like trying to squeeze into, like, your high school clothes. Sometimes you just got to accept, you know, things have moved on.
You got it. And that's powerful, right? If everything's temporary, then clinging to it, it just doesn't work.
Okay, listener, time for you to jump in here. What's one thing you know is impermanent, but you still, like, struggle to accept it? A job, relationship, maybe even a belief you hold dear. Hold on to that thought because we're diving deeper.
So we've got impermanence as the foundation, right? And the Source builds on that. It talks about how our expectations, well, they're suffering generators.
Oh, yeah?
It's like this. When we get attached to how things should go, to specific outcomes, we're basically asking for disappointment, adding an extra layer of, well, suffering to a situation that's already, unpredictable.
Oh, I am so guilty of that. The expectations thing, I mean. It's like I have this whole script in my head of how things are supposed to go.
Right.
And when reality veers off course, man, I get thrown.
But that's human, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a common experience. And the Source, it gets into this. It links this attachment to what Buddhists call craving and aversion.
Craving and aversion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like two sides of the same coin. We crave what we don't have and we push away what we don't like. We're constantly striving for something other than what is.
Okay, so how do we break free from that? Letting go of expectations. Does that mean giving up on all our goals and dreams?
That's where it gets interesting. The Source makes a point of saying it's not about abandoning our aspirations. It's more about, how do I put it, releasing that need, that iron grip on a specific outcome.
Okay, so I can still, set sail for that dream island vacation.
Oh, absolutely.
But maybe not freak out if there's a little rough water along the way.
Exactly. It's about accepting that there will be challenges, right? And being ready to adjust our sails along the way.
So listener, think about a recent disappointment, something that didn't go your way. Was it the actual event that stung the most? Or was it your expectations, that picture in your head of how it should have been? Sometimes just recognizing that can be huge.
You're right. It's a powerful first step towards loosening that grip of attachment and creating space for peace, for acceptance.
Awesome. So we've got impermanence, expectations. What else does this Source give us to add to our letting go toolkit?
Well, there's a practice that's at the heart of letting go, and that's mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Oh, I'm all about practical stuff. What's that look like in terms of, actually letting go?
It's not just about sitting there, eyes closed, It's more about becoming aware, gently aware of our thoughts and feelings without getting swept away.
Okay.
Imagine watching leaves float down a stream.
Okay, I can see that.
You see them, right? You acknowledge them, but you don't grab on, you don't try to control where they go.
So thoughts and feelings are just floating by.
Exactly. And we have so many swirling around in our minds all the time. It's easy to get pulled under, to let them dictate what we do.
So mindfulness is coming up for air.
Yes, it's about creating space between us and those thoughts and emotions so we can choose how to respond instead of just reacting. The Source Puts it beautifully, actually. We are not our thoughts or emotions. Rather, these are passing experiences.
I love that. So it's not about pretending we don't have feelings or pushing them down. It's more like, recognizing they're not the whole story. Like guests that pop in, but they don't live there.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we do that? Any tips?
Here's a simple one, listener. Next time you get hooked on a thought, any thought, just label it. Without judgment. If you're feeling anxious, just notice it. Ah, anxiety is here. You're not trying to fight it, just acknowledging it's there.
It's like, come in, anxiety, have a seat, don't overstay your welcome, though.
That's the idea. That simple act, labeling it, it creates space. It's like a pause button for your mind.
Yeah.
You might be surprised how much just that little bit of space can change things.
Awesome. So we've got impermanence, expectations, mindfulness, feeling like I'm building a real toolkit here. What else should we add?
Well, the source then brings up something that might seem kind of contradictory. Non-attachment.
Non-attachment. Okay, that's an interesting one.
It basically asks, how can we really enjoy life, embrace it fully, without getting attached to things?
That's a good question. It does seem kind of like a paradox. How
Yeah.
can you truly enjoy something without being attached to it? I mean, isn't that part of what makes life, meaningful?
That's a common misconception, that attachment equals enjoyment. But the source makes the case that real joy, real fulfillment, actually comes from engaging with life without that clinging, that need to possess it.
Okay, help me out here. How do you experience joy without attachment? I'm picturing a life that's like kind of bland, no passion, no excitement.
I hear you. Let me give you an example. Think about watching a sunset. You can be totally awestruck by the beauty, right? The colors, how it makes you feel. But you don't need to own it. You don't need to make it last forever. You're engaged. You're letting yourself be moved by it. But you're not, like, trying to grab it and hold on.
Ah, I get it. It's like appreciating something without needing it to be yours forever.
That's it. And think about it. How many times have you felt disappointed because something you were attached to, well, it changed or went away? Non-attachment doesn't mean we stop caring or enjoying things. It just means we loosen our grip.
So it's less about, what was that phrase in the original transcript? Engagement without possession.
Right.
It's more like engagement without clinging. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Exactly. And what's great about this approach is that it builds resilience, inner peace. When we're not constantly trying to control things, we're better able to handle change, loss, when it inevitably comes, I mean.
Yeah, it's like if you're already expecting the unexpected, it doesn't hit you quite as hard.
Yeah, right, exactly. Non-attachment, it lets us ride the waves, to flow with things, because change is really the only constant.
I'm realizing some of the most joyful times in my life have been when I just let go.
Mm.
When I let go of those expectations and just was present.
It is a paradox, isn't it? The more we let go, the more open we become to life, the richness of it, the fullness of it.
This is really shifting my perspective.
Okay.
Okay, we got impermanence, expectations, mindfulness, non-attachment. And I'm getting the feeling there's even more to uncover. What else does this source have to say about letting go?
It does. And it takes us to something that can be, well, a little tough. But it's so important for truly letting go. And that's forgiveness.
Forgiveness. I can see how that ties into letting go. But the source, it doesn't shy away from this at all, does it? What makes it so essential?
Well, think about it. When we're holding on to resentment, anger towards someone, maybe even ourselves, it's heavy,
Oh, yeah. Like carrying around a weight.
Exactly. And the source, it makes this really important point. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about you freeing yourself from that anger, that resentment.
I think that's where people get tripped up. It's like,
Yeah.
if I forgive them, am I letting them off the hook?
I get that. I do. But forgiveness, it's not about the other person. It's about recognizing that holding on to anger, it only hurts you.
Yeah.
It's like, what's that saying? Drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Wow. Yeah. That's a powerful way to put it. It really shows how forgiveness is, it's an act of self-compassion.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes that you can direct forgiveness outwards towards others and inwards towards yourself. We're often so hard on ourselves, we set these high standards, and then when we don't meet them, man, we can be our own worst critics.
Oh, tell me about it. That inner critic can be brutal. So how do we even begin to cultivate forgiveness? For ourselves and the others, it feels like a huge task.
It doesn't have to be this massive shift. Just start by noticing, acknowledging that hurt, that resentment you're holding on to. Don't judge yourself for it. Just notice it's there.
So awareness is step one. Then what? Do we just tell ourselves, let it go?
It's a little more than that. It's more about shifting our perspective.
Hmm.
Try to see things from the other person's side. Remember, everyone's got their own struggles, their own battles, they're fighting, their actions. They often come from their own pain, their own insecurities.
It's true. It's easy to get caught up in our own story and forget that other people, well, they have their own stories too.
And when it comes to forgiving yourself, try to offer yourself the same compassion you'd offer a friend who made a similar mistake. Remember, we're all human. We mess up. That doesn't make us any less worthy.
This is really hitting home for me. I realize I tend to hold on to past mistakes,
Mm.
regrets, way longer than I need to. It's like I'm punishing myself for something I can't change.
It happens. It's a common pattern.
Mm.
But we can break free. The Source talks about forgiveness as like untying a knot that's been binding us to the past. When we release it, we can move forward with more lightness, more ease.
Listener, take a moment here. Is there something you're holding on to that isn't serving you? A past hurt, a grudge, maybe a mistake you keep replaying in your mind? Forgiveness could be the key to finally letting that go.
It can be so powerful, truly healing, liberating even.
Okay, so we've got impermanence, expectations, mindfulness, non-attachment, forgiveness. I'm seeing a theme here, right? It's not just about stuff. It's about our inner world, our thoughts, our beliefs.
You're onto something there. And that brings us to another biggie when it comes to letting go. The ego.
Ah, the ego. Always up to something. Sometimes I imagine it like a tiny little dictator, in my head trying to control everything.
Not a bad analogy. The Source describes the ego as, well, it clings. It clings to labels, judgments, identities, things that actually limit us.
So the ego wants to keep us in a box, while letting go is about, like, breaking free from that box.
That's a great way to put it. The ego, it thrives on control, on that illusion that we're separate. Individuals, somehow independent from everything.
And letting go is about recognizing that we're actually part of something bigger.
Yes. The Source emphasizes this Buddhist concept of interconnectedness. We're not isolated, we're all threads in this giant tapestry of life.
I love that image. It reminds me of that quote, no man is an island.
John Donne.
Yeah.
Perfect example. When we really get that interconnectedness, it's easier to let go of that ego need to be right, to win, to prove something.
Because if we're all connected, then, well, separating ourselves, competing, doesn't really make sense, does it?
Exactly. It's a shift in how we see things, and it can be incredibly freeing.
So how do we loosen that ego's grip? How do we go from, like, feeling separate to feeling connected?
It starts with noticing, becoming aware of how the ego works. It's subtle, Notice how it shows up in your thoughts, your actions, your reactions.
So it's like catching ourselves when we're clinging to those limiting beliefs, those judgments, like, oh, there's my ego again, telling me I'm not good enough.
You got it. Just that awareness is huge. And then, instead of judging yourself for having those thoughts, try meeting them with kindness, understanding.
So, like, hey, ego, thanks for trying to protect me, but I've got this.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging it's there without letting it run the show.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, we've gone from impermanence to expectations to mindfulness to non-attachment to forgiveness to the ego, and I'm guessing there's even more to explore. What else does this Source have to offer on letting go?
Well, it gets into something that a lot of us have a hard time with, uncertainty. It points out how much we crave certainty, how we want to know exactly how things will turn out, and how that actually causes us suffering.
Oh, man. That's me in a nutshell. I'm a planner. I like to have things mapped out to know what's coming, the unknown. Yeah, that can be pretty unsettling.
And yet the Source is clear about this. Embracing the unknown, it's essential for letting go. Because let's face it, life is unpredictable. Things rarely go exactly according to plan.
Hold on. Doesn't that sound a little reckless? Like we're supposed to just throw caution to the wind and let chaos reign?
Not quite. It's not about being reckless or giving up on planning altogether. It's more about shifting how we relate to the unknown. Instead of fearing it, we can approach it with curiosity, openness.
So instead of trying to control everything, we learn to surrender.
Yeah.
Go with the flow. Isn't that what a lot of spiritual traditions teach?
It's a common thread. And it makes sense, right? When we're clinging to our expectations, we're tense, resistant. But when we loosen up, when we allow for the unexpected, that's when new possibilities open up.
It reminds me of that quote, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Sometimes we're so focused on getting things right that we miss the beauty of what's right in front of us.
That's it. And the Source emphasizes this. Embracing uncertainty can actually lead to more joy, more freedom. Because when we let go of that need to know what's coming next, that's when serendipity, magic, those things can enter our lives.
I love that. It's like saying yes to the adventure, even when we don't have the map. Speaking of saying yes, are there any like concrete things we can do to get more comfortable with uncertainty? Because let's be real, it can be kind of scary to let go of control.
Absolutely. One thing that's really helpful is something we've already talked about: mindfulness. When we're present, grounded in the now, we're less likely to get caught up in worries about the future, regrets about the past. We're just here, now, experiencing what is.
So mindfulness is like an anchor. It keeps us steady even when things feel uncertain.
Exactly. And another thing that helps is reframing how we see uncertainty. Instead of something to be feared, what if it's an opportunity? An opportunity to grow, to expand. Think about jumping off a diving board. There's that moment of, whoa, what's going to happen? And then there's the exhilaration of the plunge, the feeling of being fully alive.
I love that. It's a good reminder that even though uncertainty can be uncomfortable, it can also lead to amazing experiences. It's like the magic often happens outside our comfort zone.
Got it. And remember, this doesn't mean we become passive. We can still have goals, make plans, take action, but we do it knowing that, hey, things might not go exactly as planned, and that's okay.
So it's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between setting intentions and surrendering to the flow, taking action, but also being open to, whatever unfolds.
You nailed it. It's a dance. Effort and allowing. And the more we practice, the more graceful we become.
This deep dive is seriously changing how I think about letting go. We've gone from impermanence to expectations to mindfulness to non-attachment to forgiveness to ego to uncertainty. It's like all these pieces are fitting together.
They are all part of the letting go puzzle. And speaking of interconnectedness, there's one final piece we need to add: compassion.
Compassion. Yeah, I can definitely see how that fits in.
Yeah.
But how does the source connect it to letting go?
It says that cultivating compassion for ourselves and others is crucial for letting go of judgment, resistance. When we approach ourselves and others with kindness and understanding, well, it's easier to let go of that need to control, to be right, to prove something.
Makes sense. When we're judging, criticizing, we cling tighter to our own perspectives. But when we soften, when we tap into compassion, those walls start to come down.
Exactly. Compassion lets us see each other and ourselves for who we really are: imperfect, doing the best we can. And when we recognize that shared humanity, it's easier to let go of judgment, control.
I love that. Compassion is like the antidote to the ego, to that need to separate ourselves, to feel superior. It connects us to our own hearts, to each other.
Beautifully said. And the source reminds us, compassion isn't something we have to force. It's already there inside us. It's about cultivating it, expressing it.
So how do we do that? Tap into it, any practices that help.
Mindfulness is a great one. When we're aware of our thoughts, our feelings, we notice when judgment, criticism pops up. And then instead of getting swept away, we can choose to meet it with kindness.
Like, hey, judgment, I see you, but I'm not buying what you're selling today.
That's it. It's about recognizing it without giving it power, and then we can choose compassion.
But what about when it's hard? To feel compassion, like for someone who's hurt us or done something we really disagree with.
I hear you. Those are tough situations. And it's important to remember, compassion doesn't mean condoning bad behavior. It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone, even those who've messed up or caused us pain.
So it's about holding that tension, acknowledging the harm, but still choosing compassion.
Exactly. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to create boundaries, distance, from people who are repeatedly causing you harm.
That's an important point. Compassion isn't about being a doormat. It's about honoring our own needs and extending kindness to others.
Beautifully said. And remember, compassion's a practice, not a destination. We're all learning, growing. There will be times when we stumble, when we fall back into old patterns of judgment, criticism.
But we keep practicing, keep coming back to that intention of cultivating compassion for ourselves, for others.
Exactly. And the more we practice, the more naturally it will flow into our thoughts, our words, our actions.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've gone from impermanence to expectations to mindfulness to non-attachment to forgiveness to ego to uncertainty to compassion. It's amazing how connected all of this is.
It's a beautiful tapestry, and we're all weaving it together, one thread at a time.
I'm realizing that letting go, it's not just about clearing out clutter. It's about letting go of those things inside us that are holding us back. From freedom, from joy.
You've got it. It's an inner journey, a transformation that starts from within.
I love that. Outer order reflects inner peace.
And vice versa. Sometimes taking action in the outer world can actually shift things inside us. It's a loop, you know?
So much to think about.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, does the source highlight anything else about letting go? Any final words of wisdom?
You know, it's interesting. The source material we've been exploring, it doesn't specifically mention gratitude.
Gratitude. Huh. Seems like it would fit right in.
It does, and that's why I think it's worth bringing up, because think about it. When we let go, when we release that grip on how things should be, it makes space. Space to appreciate what is right here, right now.
That makes so much sense. It's like by letting go of those attachments, we're opening ourselves up to like a whole new level of appreciation for the present moment.
Exactly. Instead of focusing on what's missing, we can focus on what we have, the good stuff. And it doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing. It could be that first sip of coffee in the morning, the feeling of the sun on your skin, or, a random act of kindness from someone.
I love that. It's about finding those little moments of joy, the everyday stuff that we often miss when we're, stuck in our heads.
That's it. And the more we practice gratitude, the more we cultivate this feeling of, well, abundance, contentment, no matter what's going on around us.
So gratitude's a great place to start. But I'm guessing there's more to this practical letting go toolkit, right? What else can our listener do to like actually bring these ideas into their daily life?
Well, remember all that talk about mindfulness? It's not just some abstract concept. It's something we can actually do, weave it into our lives.
So it's not just about like sitting on a cushion and meditating for hours.
Not at all. We can be mindful while we're doing the dishes, taking a walk, even waiting in line at the grocery store. It's about bringing our attention to the present moment, noticing what we're sensing, thinking, feeling, without judgment.
It's like hitting pause on that autopilot mode we all get into. Really tuning in to what's happening right here, right now.
You got it. And that's why it's so powerful for letting go. When we're present, we're less likely to get caught up in those old patterns of clinging, resisting. We have more space to choose how we respond.
So it's like mindfulness gives us that ability to like catch ourselves when we're clinging.
Yeah.
And then gently, redirect our attention.
I love that. It's about empowerment, creating a life that's more conscious, more intentional.
This is great stuff. But what about when it's really hard to let go? I mean, when you feel like you're just holding on for dear life, even though you know it's hurting you, what advice would you give someone who's, feeling stuck?
First of all, be kind to yourself. Letting go, it's a process. It's not like you just flip a switch and you're done. There will be times when it's easy and times when it's, well, really tough. It's like anything else, Learning a new skill, it takes practice, patience, and a lot of self-compassion.
And just like learning to ride a bike, you're going to have some wobbles along the way. The key is to get back on, right?
Exactly. And you don't have to do it alone. Lean on your support system, friends, family, a therapist, whoever can listen, and remind you that you're not alone in this.
So important. Letting go can feel isolating, but it doesn't have to be. Reaching out, that can make a huge difference.
And here's another tip. Start small. You don't have to tackle the biggest, most challenging thing right away. Pick something that feels, manageable, relatively safe to let go of.
So instead of trying to let go of, like the 20-year-old grudge, maybe start with letting go of the need to be right in, like a disagreement with a coworker.
Perfect example. Or maybe it's letting go of the need to control every little detail of your weekend plans, allowing for some, spontaneity, flexibility.
It's about building those letting go muscles, starting with those smaller weights and working your way up.
I like that analogy. It's about those small wins. They build confidence, momentum.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like we've explored letting go from every angle, from the philosophy to the practical stuff.
It's been a real journey, and I hope our listener feels like they've got some new tools, some new ways of looking at things.
Me too. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to leave our listener with? Any final nuggets of wisdom?
Letting go isn't about giving up. It's not about becoming passive. It's about embracing life, trusting the process, opening ourselves up to what's possible when we loosen our grip.
Beautiful. Reminds me of that Lao Tzu quote. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished.
I love that one. Letting go is about aligning with that rhythm, trusting that even amidst the uncertainty, the change, everything is unfolding exactly as it should.
Well, listener, I think that's the perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot, but this is really just the beginning. The real work happens out there in your life, in those moments when you choose to let go. One breath, one thought, one experience at a time.
And as you do, notice what happens. Notice how letting go creates space for something new, Lightness, freedom, peace, it was always there, just waiting to be discovered.
This has been such a great conversation. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the art of letting go.
We'd love to hear from you. What resonated? What are you inspired to try? Share your thoughts on social media and keep exploring.
Until next time, keep letting go and keep embracing the beauty of this moment.